Okay, so yeah, we have the solar eclipse through the houses, and we are going to explore solar eclipse through the 9th house, the 10th house, the 11th house, and the 12th house. So for this video, if your solar eclipse lands in these parts of these houses, then this is for you. Okay, so let's just jump straight in. So let's have a look at the solar eclipse in the 9th house. This is information for you to support you and help you process the dynamics that are going to take place here. Okay, so let's start by looking at the 9th house. So the 9th house reflects our instinct to explore beyond our immediate environment and definitions. The 9th house reflects our instinct to explore beyond our immediate environment and definitions. So as illustrated by the airplane picture here, you can see that Sagittarius, or the 9th house where the solar eclipse is landing for you and what the themes will be for the next 9 months, is to really look at the environment that you're in, to kind of get a sense of that, and also the kind of ways that you perceive the world. Okay, and you will experience through the next 6 months a very strong restlessness that will want to pull you out into going beyond these definitions. So the environment is, I encourage you over the next 6 months to at least book one travel to a place that is unknown to you. Okay, you've never been there before, and you're going to go book a hotel, or you're going to go book a Airbnb or something, but you're going to do something. You may even be forced to do it. You know, it depends on how these dynamics work, but either way, I encourage you to do this. And what I want you to do here is I want you to take in the environment, take in the experience of something that's completely new and foreign to you. And I want you to learn about the different, or see the different ways that people express themselves, how different people learn about the different worlds that they take in and are a part of. So this is the part of your life where you really want to go and learn about different aspects of how people live. And it doesn't have to be something dramatic, right? It doesn't have to be something like big. It can be something just as taking in the different cultures, the different ideas, the different perspectives that, say, this foreign environment takes place, okay? So I want to talk about this word meaning and how it relates to the experience of how do we define meaning. So what you'll notice through the next 6 months is like this insatiable desire to explore things, to learn things, to expand your mind. You may find a deep dive into astrology. You may take a course. You know, you may commit to a course that you want to learn. You may find yourself, you know, in a place of just study. And so you're going to learn through here this idea of meaning, in the sense that, why do we as human beings ascribe meaning to things? How do we define meaning? And more importantly, what is the perception of meaning for you in that sense? Okay, so this is about exploring ideas. This is about expanding your horizons, about challenging your ideas, about maybe thinking that you knew something, but now realizing, you know what, actually, I didn't know it as deeply as I did. And so this idea of exploring comes into focus here. Again, the explorer. Take a leap of faith, do something new, try something out of your comfort zone, learn about yourself, establish deeper meaning. This will all be incredibly impactful for you as you process this experience, okay? Let's go to the solar eclipse in the 10th house. So this is for you, that if you have the solar eclipse laying in your 10th house, and giving you some ideas and thoughts and perspectives around what could be supportive, meaningful, and helpful to you with this transit. Okay, let's have a look. So the 10th house reflects the consequences of your choices or our choices and what we wish to define our lives by. Okay. The 10th house reflects the consequences of our choices and what we wish to define our lives by. So let's break this down. So, right, we get to the age of 17, 18, and maybe even a little bit earlier. And by now we've had the conversation, what's the study path I'm going to take, right? What's the, what do I want to be in the world, right? And so some people will look at the kind of career market and say, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to become a fireman, I want to go into that field and study economics and such. And so what we're learning here is that classically astrology will define Capricorn or the 10th house as like your career. So in a sense, you know, on the surface, it's true. But what it's really reflecting is that moment in time where we come to ask ourselves this really big question, and very heavy sometimes question: how do we want to position ourselves in a social context? I come up to you and I say to you, hello, you know, so what do you do with your time, right? So time being a Capricorn feature, how do you define your life? And you may say, well, I define my life through this series of choices that I've made that have led me to become a professor in economics, right? So it's the essence of the choices that we make, right? And so throughout this sort of 6-month period, you're going to find yourself really looking at the types of choices that you make about your life and how those choices, in a sense, have impacted you and your journey, the road that you've taken, and also the time that you invest. So how do you position yourself socially in the world? So you'll find things like your work will change. Maybe there's a new promotion coming your way. Maybe the time and effort that you've put in and the choices that you've made have led you to a position where people have seen that these choices are great. And so, you know, you're going to be rewarded for that, for your time and effort that you put into it, for the time, essentially. And so also here, the good thing to kind of think about when it comes to this, this solar 10th house eclipse pattern is, what are the choices that you make in the day, in the morning? What are the consequences of those choices that you make? You know, how do you wish to spend your time? This is a really profound, deep inner reflection tool that can provide quite a lot of awareness for you. Okay. I want to talk about grief here in the sense that grief is also very much associated with this archetype of the 10th house, because we're looking at the process of emotions and experiences that we've had in the past that have been unfavorable to us, right? A change in career, loss of a parent, something as normal as like just an event takes place in your life and it really impacts you emotionally. And so it's important to know that it's the archetype of the 10th house that also speaks to the way that we emotionally process things over time. And so this relationship to going back to these emotions, back to these experiences, and really feeling the sadness or the pain, you know, around these experiences that have impacted us. And of course, this will come up to the surface for you with this transit. And then finally, I want to touch on boundaries. Throughout this solar eclipse period, 6 months, you're also going to learn about, you know, your relationship to how do you put it through and establish and express your boundaries? Where do you define yourself? How do you tell people what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for you? What is your capacity for tolerance around experiences and or not? So taking ownership of the emotional bandwidth that you have and recognizing what you can tolerate and what you cannot, what you can carry and what you cannot. This is a big thing with this 10th house solar eclipse transit. So you may get a lot of illumination around this and learn stronger boundary making. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and have a look at the 11th house of this process. So if you have, of course, the solar eclipse landing in your 11th house, this is for you. Some of my ideas, some of my thoughts around how this can impact you. Okay. So let's have a look at the 11th house. So the 11th house reflects our need to belong to a collective expression of who we are individually. The 11th house reflects our collective need to belong to. The 11th house reflects our need to belong to a collective expression of who we are individually. Okay, so let's just break this down. Throughout the next 6 months, themes of friendship, the community that you want to belong to or you are in, the relationship to the wider group of association, right? Whether it be associated with extended family, larger friend circle, your work environment. This is the type of environment, these are the types of themes that are going to show up for you. So this idea of the relationship that we have to the collective expression of who we are individually is you've got a group of people, say 10 people, and within this group of 10 people, each person has an individual way of seeing things, right? Has an individual expression. And so we learn a lot about ourselves in relation to a group. We learn the type of people that we resonate with. We learn about the type of people that we don't. We learn about our relationship to feeling included and seen and understood within a group context. And we also learn about how we may feel afraid of rejection and abandonment within the context of the group environment. And so when we merge and sort of like meld ourselves into a group, how do you come out? How do you express yourself? How do you establish your space and contribute to the environment, to the people, to the idea, to the ideal that is essentially a part of it, right? So it's a group project. What's your role within that? How do you express that role? How do you validate that role? How do you bring your needs to the role? So you learn a great deal about your individual nature within the context of a group environment, and specifically how you fit in. So there's a tremendous amount of growth that actually takes place when we begin to become aware of how we are within the context of the group. And the group's always going to give us a profound reflection of our behaviors and our attitudes and our emotional positions towards things that expand us beyond our own internal perceptions of ourselves. And so we learn a great deal about that through our friendship dynamics. And so community with the solar eclipse here in the 11th house may come into wider perspective for you, wider scope for you. And of course, this is important, right? Right. So what type of community do you want to belong to? What type of community are you associated with? And how does that community reflect your sense of individuality or not? How do you participate within it? Okay. How's your hopes and ideals supported and championed by the environment in which you're a part of and or not? So this is a theme that's very prevalent and very real. And so here we have the context of, I have aspirations and I want to achieve these aspirations. Do I feel that I'm cheered on, or am I misunderstood and, not under, not part of it, whatever that may reflect and mean to you? I want to talk about this idea of rebellion. So during this solar eclipse, you're going to find yourself really being, in a sense, wanting to accelerate things. You're going to be very bored with the mundane. You're going to not want to participate in the general kind of ways that things have been done, because there's a part of you that wants to step outside of that traditional role, that traditional way of doing things, and say, is there something different? So be mindful through this pattern of giving yourself space to say, actually, I'm actually going to probably be a little bit more adventurous, rebellious, and disagreeing a little bit more on the traditional ways of doing things. And I'm okay with that. Okay. I'm also okay with checking in with whether or not the friendships that I have are still nurturing me, and am I still nurturing them? All right. Cool. So let's jump over to the final house here. And we're going to look at the solar eclipse through the 12th house. Right. So if you've got the solar eclipse in the 12th house, this is the video for you. Okay. So the 12th house reflects the return to source, to reconnect with the divine. Okay. There are many other descriptions that will be associated with this, but in essence, the 12th house reflects the return to source, to reconnect with the divine. Okay. And so this imagery over here of this Tibetan monk that sits and kind of interfaces with water, I thought was really great, because water is associated with the Pisces archetype here. The kind of, how does consciousness flow? Right? Our relationship to consciousness, right? Our connection to the fluidity of life. So here you are going to experience for 6 months experiences that will firstly and sometimes be around crises, right? Crises like overwhelm, crises like experiences where extreme fatigue, or that there's too many things going on and there's not enough energy capacity to be able to kind of really digest and anchor in to the form, your actual reality. So this is a time where this imagery of water and the stillness of the monk comes into play, where there is a need to be in tune with the fluid nature of water and life. That oftentimes, and that's why I talk about there in terms of loss of identity, in the sense that as you return to the source, as we reconnect with the divine, there is a process of coming in confrontation with the self. And this self is our ego desire, right? Our ego will, we want to do this and want to do that and do these things. And in this 12th house experience, you may come to experience crises that confront these desires, that overwhelm the ego structure, in which the only response is to say, I want to let go of this. I don't want to do this, or it's out of my hands. A big part of this process when we're connecting with the divine, or being able to return to source, is that we may have certain emotional and psychological attachments to ideals that, through an experience of disillusionment or being disenchanted, we may lose the identity relationship. We may feel that we've lost something about ourselves. And of course, this is on one level true, because our way of relating to the thing that we had an ideal over, or we felt deep meaning in, it's now returned to the ocean. It has become one with, we've sacrificed it, we've surrendered it, right? And so in that process of no longer being emotionally attached to the thing, the car, the job, this ideal, whatever that may be for you, we surrender the process, and we feel that our sense of self gets lost in that process. We kind of merge with the totality, and that can be a very painful experience, because it's like a deep surrender to something, and we may feel like we're dying, essentially. So this is a period of time where I encourage you to return to silence. I encourage you to return to a place of union with something deeper within inside of yourself, to take rest, to allow yourself to become closed to the bigger world, and to spend time just exploring your own unconscious, your own psychic space, This is a profound time for healing, profound time for your ability to reconnect with the parts of you that have been wounded. And through silence and through isolation, just reconnect with those inner dimensions of you that, need attention and healing and support and sensitivity. Okay. And this is the archetype of transcendence here. Once we integrate these deep spiritual moments and experiences into surrender, and they become one with our own inner space, we transcend the duality of our ego structure and we integrate a unique oneness experience. It's very kind of abstract in that last way of describing it, but you'll get a sense of what it's like. You'll feel it as it comes through. Okay.